All right. So before I get into a heavy topic this morning that you need to pay attention to and be aware of, let's play with this pharmaceutical stuff for a minute. Kind of give us an idea of what's going on. I already looked at Amber's, and she had a great. She has a great chart. So I'll just start with that. Amber, you compared a previous to a more current. Is that correct? And then you did the by money as well, and you saw a trend in that.
Yeah.
So what trend did you find?
A lot of it was affected by COVID.
Such as?
Vitamin D.
So you saw that post-COVID or pre-COVID, you saw a difference in the prescriptions for vitamin D or the...
Vitamin D and the vaccine for it, and effects of not going outside, or effects of getting sick, even effects from sitting at home doing nothing, gaining weight. Now you're on a diabetic medication to lose
Okay.
weight.
Yeah. Things got really different. I saw a picture the other night where they had at a park, they had put two 2x4s across a basketball goal so you couldn't play basketball. Y'all remember that? You don't remember that? Or you still see in certain stores, the distancing, or walk this way. And we're going to cure COVID by walking a certain way on the bread aisle and stuff. Don't go outside, don't get sunlight, and then now we get a spike in vitamin D prescriptions. Where was that on the list for vitamin D? Huh? Second? Well, there was a commonality in all people who suffered or maybe even died from COVID was there was no vitamin D in their system. I think I'd always ran around outside, but it gave me a little more effort. Like even in the winter months especially, go get some sun. It's going to be cold, but go get a little bit of sun. It only takes 6 or 7 minutes a day to keep yourself healthy. Any other trends in that? I thought we saw one with the GLP-1 medications are in there now, right?
Yeah.
That weren't there maybe a year ago, maybe even 2 years ago. Where's that? The semaglutide or the Ozempic or Wegovy or whatever?
Ozempic was on number 5 of the profited drugs.
It's expensive. How much? 16.1 billion. Did you know that there were people who needed it for their blood sugar control because they were diabetic but couldn't get a hold of it because people were taking it for weight loss reasons? And so we were running a shortage of it. They couldn't make it fast enough. Is that one of the 4 horsemen? Okay. Luke, did you do it? Okay. Luke's like, I failed you, man. I failed you. You're going to have to ride the back of the old Gus. I think Gus done it. You could count on Gus, couldn't you? Gus, any trends you saw on your list?
I didn't compare them. I just got the 10 top prescribed drugs, and I found it in 2022. I couldn't find an accurate one.
Okay, so what do you have in 2022 as your top 10?
Vitamin D is number 1. I don't know how to say these. Amoxicillin.
Amoxicillin. That's just an antibiotic. The form of penicillin.
Levothyroxine.
Okay.
Lisinopril.
Lisinopril. We talked about that the other day. Who remembers what lisinopril was? Come on. Lisinopril. I wrote it over there on that board.
What day?
What day? Monday, I believe. And shock compensatory mechanisms, angiotensin, renin, ACE inhibitor. Remember ACE inhibitor, Gus?
That what?
ACE inhibitor, angiotensin converting enzyme. And I talked about when somebody's taking lisinopril that they can't pull their core down to compensate for a loss of fluid or shock. And you just now told me that it's the number 3. It's at least in the top 5 most prescribed drugs.
Yes, it's number 4.
In your list, it's number 4. Is lisinopril on everyone's list? You know someone who takes it. I bet you know someone who takes it. Those people are already behind the power curve when it comes to insult and injury to their body because they cannot compensate as well as someone without it. But remember, it interrupts that mechanism in which we shrink the vasculature to sustain normal perfusion in a shocky environment. Go ahead, Gus.
Then ibuprofen. Then amphetamine.
Amphetamines? Why? Wait a minute. Like methamphetamine?
Just said.
Like Oklahoma candy? It's in the system of ADD and ADHD. Don't get me off on that. But we take 8-year-old kids and 8-year-old boys and try to set them in a chair for 8 hours a day, and when they get restless and they don't want to sit in a chair for 8 hours a day, which is no little boy wants to sit still for 8 hours a day, let's knock him down with this. Now, I'm not saying there aren't people who do suffer from ADD and ADHD. I'm not downplaying that at all. But that is a form of amphetamine and Adderall, and it's also widely abused. You've got so many people who in your high schools and middle schools who are taking Adderall and they find out, hey, give me one of those. So if I don't have ADD or ADHD and I take an Adderall, I'm cleaning the house. We're going to work. It will speed me up because it's a methamphetamine and that's what it does to you. But in the people who actually suffer in the prefrontal cortex trying to filter down all the information that comes through at one time, that allows them to hyper focus. So there is some benefit to it, but it is widely abused as well. So be aware of that when you're getting into those adolescent years, that somebody may be getting a hold of an Adderall indiscriminately, non-prescription. Okay, what else?
And then the amlodipine. I don't know how you say it.
You're not saying it well enough for me to interpret it, but
Amlodipine. Number 7.
Norvasc, amlodipine. I can't say it either. Okay, keep going.
Albuterol.
Albuterol. How many's got albuterol in the top 10? Did we talk about albuterol yesterday? What class of drug is albuterol? I want you to be medical now. I want you to be professional. Tell me the class of drug albuterol is in.
It's a beta 2.
Beta 2.
Beta 2 agonist. Look at you guys go. Look at you go. Could I classify it another way? Jordan, I think you were about to say another way.
Me? No, I just said a beta blocker. That's what I just said.
But it's an agonist. It's not a blocker, it's an agonist. I thought you were going to say, I saw the B come out of your mouth. I thought you were going to say a bronchodilator. And so it could also be classified as a bronchodilator.
Yeah, that's true.
Then number 9, prednisone. I don't know.
Prednisone?
Yeah.
Prednisone. What is prednisone? We talked about it yesterday. We talked about it in a generic way, not a trade way.
Isn't it a steroid?
It's a corticosteroid. So you got 2 drugs on there that apply today. We've got albuterol. We also have prednisone. And these people with COPD get those drugs. I don't recall your list having a diabetic med on it. What are we noticing already in the patterns, though? We've got different kinds of lists from different sources. What are we finding? A lot of blood pressure. A lot of respiratory. A lot of locked up in the house, not getting any sunlight. Or if we do go out in the sun, we cover everything up and slather on chemical sunscreens. A lot of pain medicine. And thyroid medicines. All metabolism. All of this, guys, is back there with the 4 horsemen. I hate to keep beating that to death, but what are you going to go out and see? When it comes to medical emergencies, what are you likely going to go see? Well, now you know. Does anybody have like an antidepressant? You got an antidepressant on your list? If you've got something like a Prozac or a Wellbutrin, bupropion, any of those drugs, Abilify, drugs that are supposed to make the antidepressant drugs work better? No? I'm surprised that you don't have that on your list. It might have been knocked off the list due to Ozempic and vitamin D. I promise you it's in the top 20. I promise you it's in the top 20. Did anybody find anything on their list that surprised them? Like, wow, I didn't realize that drug was so prevalent. Well, what's the moneymaker? I asked you to also do top 10 drugs by profit. So what's the moneymaker? Do what?
Cancer drug.
Cancer drugs? Which one?
Keytruda.
Keytruda, Ozempic.
I'm not familiar with Keytruda, so what is that?
Cancer. It's a cancer.
Is it a cancer drug? Okay.
It's 27.2 billion.
Ozempic, Dupixent, Eliquis, which is blood thinner, Biktarvy, Darzalex, Opdivo.
Anybody in here work in a pharmacy or as a pharmacy tech? I had a student a couple of semesters ago that was a pharmacy tech, and we did the same exercise, and he said, oh, well, those are what we call our keep door open drugs. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, we lose money on a lot of drugs because we have to sell them cheaper than what they cost us. It's just the way the insurance companies and everything's set up. He said, but that drug, when we get a bottle or a box and it's got 10,000 tablets in it, and we will dispense that in a day or two, at 25 or 30 month, a month supply at a time, it pays the bills for everything in the pharmacy, salaries and everything. We actually offset our loss by selling that drug, he said. So those are what we call the keep door open drugs. They keep us here. I don't want to be this kind of guy, but there's no money in wellness, is there? Pharmaceutical companies would not be here if everybody was well. So I kind of keep that on the back burner. I don't put, I'm not a flat earther when it comes to that kind of stuff. Drugs are important. If you need the drugs, you need the drugs. Don't get me wrong, they've saved countless lives. It's a modern miracle of medicine and chemistry. But I'm of the firm belief that if you've got an illness or injury and you take the drug, at some point you probably need to. There should be healing, and I don't think you could ignore the fact that you guys are going to walk into homes and sit down, and these drugs are going to be surrounding these people, and yet these people are still what? Sick. And these drugs are causing you problems as a caregiver, aren't they? For example, elderly guy in my church community, known him forever, heart attack, cancer, just the four horsemen have caught him. And he's not done yet. He's still fighting. But he was mowing his lawn and he got hit in the face by something, like a tree branch, or I don't remember exactly what hit him. Never knew what hit him. But he started bleeding from his face, like a nosebleed kind of thing. Because he's taken the Eliquis and all the other blood thinners, they can't control his bleeding, and he ends up down in a high-end hospital in the Metroplex area to try to control the bleeding. And he had to be admitted, and the risk of him getting off the blood thinners is a risk of hampering his heart, but he's also going to bleed to death if he doesn't stop. And so you'll find people who are taking blood thinners, and you're having a very difficult time controlling their bleeding. So in this guy, you can't tie a tourniquet on his face. You can only pack it so much. I mean, and it's a deep bleed, and it's going to cause you problems. And this guy's just going to be bleeding on you in the ambulance. And the Eliquis is the problem. He won't clot. His clotting factors have been mitigated or wiped out. These drugs now are not your friend, and they're his friend. And so after 3 or 4 days, they finally got the bleeding controlled and pulled the packing out of his nasal cavity to try to make sure it doesn't continue to bleed. You just can't be doing risky behaviors. You're like, well, he was riding a mower, mowing his lawn. Well, that's a risky behavior when you're on this stuff. You just can't. And a lot of them just get hit and they start bleeding under the skin, and you'll watch the bruise just grow. By the time you get them to the hospital, this whole arm is blackened and purple from a small hit, right there on the forearm or something. Run from the horse, okay? That's what I'm trying to tell you today. Run from the horse. And boy, they are money makers too. And when a drug goes through trial, and if we lecture on the pharmacology chapter, you would hear this stuff. You can read this stuff in the pharmacology chapter. A drug comes to market, they have a drug, the pharmaceutical company wants to bring it to market. The FDA says you got to prove that the drug is safe. We're going to run it through trials. They do animal trials, and then they finally go to human trials. And you probably heard on TV before, if you or someone you love suffers from type 2 diabetes, you want to be part of a trial. Bayer Pharmaceuticals, I'm just making one up, Bayer Pharmaceuticals is enlisting 1,000 people. Call this number to see if you want to be part of the trial. And if they prove it in human trials to be safe, and that's a lengthy process, then it can go to patent and it can go to market. So it stays on patent for 5 years, and a patented drug has a high profit margin. I mean, it is expensive, right? And therefore, there's a slush fund being built because they don't know exactly what the effects will be 10 years down the road. And when the lawyers get a hold of it and go, oh, that drug causes your heart to explode. There was a popular weight drug back in the early 90s, I believe, called Fen-Phen. And Fen-Phen was causing your heart valves to warp. And so you had to go in and have valve replacement. And so they withdrew it from the market. Now everybody sued, but the pharmaceutical company did not go bankrupt because they had money in a slush fund just for that reason. They had money in a slush fund just for that reason. Johnson & Johnson baby powder, talcum powder, had asbestos in it, caused a bunch of cancers. Johnson & Johnson's still in existence because they have a slush fund for it. And then they get sued, and Congress makes a big deal about it because, hey, you knew that was there and you didn't say anything about it. It's okay, we got money to, what do you want us to do? You want us to pay damages? We got the money to pay the damages. Slap us on the wrist, we'll pay the money. We already accounted for it. All drugs that you deal with or your patients deal with are poisons. You're like, poisons? Yeah, dose makes the poison. Can you overdose on all those drugs? Sure. Some drugs you can underdose on. So watch this. This is important. Do a little math here. If this was a graph, remember we did the XY axis the other day? So this is a graph. You probably wish I would draw it in a different way, don't you? Most people in math see their y-axis over there. That's okay. That's okay. So these two lines represent something. They have names, and it would not hurt you to know this. This is called ED50 line, ED50, and this is called LD50. ED50 and LD50. The ED50 line stands for effective dose in 50% of the population. Effective dose. So when a patient takes a drug, or you as a EMT or paramedic give a drug, it goes into the bloodstream at some point. And there are different ways we could give it to get it into the bloodstream, but eventually it does. And we call it the serum concentration. Serum, that means in the blood, concentration. The serum concentration has to cross some threshold in order to be effective, in order to get what we want out of it. Does that make sense to you? You have to take enough of it. If you take too much of it and you overdose and you get above this threshold, this stands for lethal dose in 50% of the population. 50% of the population given a dose that high will die. Let's assign some arbitrary number to this. Let's say this is 8 and this is 4. You with me on the y-axis? 8 and 4. So 8 over 4 equals 2. Am I correct in that math? If I divide 4 into 8, it'll go 2 times. So what I say there is the therapeutic index is equal to 2. The therapeutic index is equal to 2. Each drug has a different ED and LD 50. The closer these two are together, or should I say, when TI, therapeutic index, approaches 1, you have a very dangerous drug. Chas, does that make sense to you? When those two lines get super close together, in other words, as they approach 1, you have a very dangerous drug. Because to get just enough without killing you is a hard target to reach, isn't it? And luckily for us as EMTs and paramedics, the drugs that we have at our disposal have a relatively wide therapeutic index. But there are some drugs out there today who have a very narrow therapeutic index, and we're going to run into those drugs in patients. A great one, to give you an example, is called digoxin. And digoxin is a drug that people who have weak hearts that don't contract very well, we talked about that the other time we did our heart lecture, they don't squeeze very well. This drug makes them squeeze harder. It's a positive inotropic drug. We talked about inotropy the other day, the ability to squeeze harder. This drug actually comes from a plant called the foxglove plant. And you can buy that plant and you can put it in your home or in your front porch or in your flower beds. What happens if a kid goes and chews on that plant? They're going to get a unspecified dose of digitalis or digoxin. Could cause them some problems. But people are prescribed this drug too, and it's got a very narrow therapeutic index. Here's the problem with it. It's dangerous up here and too much. That's pretty obvious, isn't it? If you take too much, it's dangerous. And it's dangerous down there. Do what?
You always choose purple. And it fails.
It fails every time. Purple's not my deal. You keep that from me. There we go. Not enough of the drug. Sometimes drugs are lethal if you don't give enough of them. In other words, underdosing can be just as bad as overdosing. So you've got a little old 72-year-old lady who can not see very well, hear very well, kind of breaking down, kind of, and she doesn't remember if she took her digoxin today or not. So she doubled the dose, or she thinks she has taken it but didn't, so now she's underdosed. Is she in trouble? And that drug, for example, can cause any dysrhythmia known to man when not in proper amounts. Any dysrhythmia known to man. Pharmacology is very important even at the EMT level. Not that you give a lot of drugs, but you're going to encounter that. And that's the purpose of the exercise I gave you today. Your secondary exercise to that is, if you got a trade name, I want you to go back and get the generic equivalent to it. If you've got the generic name, find the common trade names. For example, ibuprofen is the generic name, Motrin is the trade name. Tylenol is the trade name, acetaminophen is the generic name. So do that. The purpose of that, once again, is when I sit down with a patient and I look at their med list, I can get a good sample history even if they can't speak to me. Does that make sense, Nate? They can't tell me what's wrong with them, but I can look at these drugs and kind of get an idea of what their history is. A good place to find these patients' med list is in their kitchen, on the refrigerator. Some people put it on their front door. Some people will just hand you a Walmart sack full of pill bottles. Some people have so many drugs and they've been to the hospital so often that you'll see a piece of paper. I'm going to grab your paper. They'll have a piece of paper like this with them all listed out because little old Nancy came over and wrote all the drugs down, so you'll know them next time, Granny. And there'll be a photocopy of the photocopy of the photocopy, and you're like, "Are you still taking all of this?" And they're like, "Yep." "Do you know how many drugs you're actually taking?" "No." And I bet their doctor doesn't either. We call that polypharmacy. Polypharmacy. Many drugs.
Would these be that you were just talking about us doing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, you've already done it. Good job. Polypharmacy. You guys are young, so I don't suspect you really visit your doctor frequently, if at all. And if you do, it's probably just for once a year physical. When you go to the doctor for a physical, they'll say, "What drugs are you taking any drugs?" And if you're like me, you go, "I only see you, so you would know, wouldn't you?" Well, if you don't take any drugs and you go to your doctor, you're abnormal. Most of the patients that they see multiple doctors. They see their primary, they see their rheumatologist, they see their endocrinologist, they see their cardiologist, they see their pulmonologist. You with me? They see their orthopedic because they broke a bone last week. They see their eye doctor, they see their ophthalmologist, the optometrist, the audiologist. I mean, they're just seeing all these people and they're like, drug, 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 drug. And there's no communication on what they're taking. They're supposed to be, and now we have online teledocs. You can just dial a doctor up online. You may even have to talk to them, just chat with them through your phone, and they'll prescribe you something. And then we put the supplements on board with it. And some of those can be dangerous in themselves. And so when we get that much going on, we say we're in a polypharmacy condition, and it really complicates things. You will find patients, if you pay attention, who are sick at home, they get admitted to the hospital and they get their medications kind of straightened up. In other words, the nurse gives the medications, we're tracking when they're being given, and these people improve drastically just because they're so non-compliant at home. So our term for that is, are they med compliant? Are they compliant with their medications? A large majority of your calls will be based on non-compliance with medication. Took too much or didn't take it. Does that make sense? So play with the drugs. I guess my funny phrase today is do drugs. Do drugs. Keep studying the drugs. Keep that top 10 list in the format. Watch society, watch trends, watch TV. Watch TV. If you watch TV, you'll watch more drug commercials than you will entertainment. And you can almost, well, you can if you pay attention, based on what you're watching and what channel you're watching, what drugs will be advertised. Drugs for old men are on Fox News. Every commercial break during the Fox News channel will be drugs geared toward old men. I'd be really curious to see how much money is spent in advertising of these drugs every year on TV. And we're one of 2 nations that allow that. You think you don't need a drug? Well, let me convince you that you do need a drug. You ever heard that? Ask your doctor about. Why do I have to ask my doctor? What's he for? Hey, doc, do I need this? Sure. And I'm going to make one more statement, and then we'll get to respiratory. Guys, girls, there are no ugly drug reps. Who are drug reps? Drug reps are people who will go around to hospitals and medical clinics and doctors and tell them how great this new drug is from this company. Trips, dinners, vacations, samples. It's great. Get your patients on this. It works wonder. Look how good. And there are no ugly drug reps. They are beautiful people. Okay, so keep in mind as we continue our lectures, because we're in medical emergencies until week 8, and we're going to deal with people with medical conditions, and these drugs are going to be right there in the middle of it. So that's why we kind of preface this as we go through it. So I told you yesterday about when it comes to respiratory calls, your patients will be in distress, failure, or arrest. Remember those 3? So let's look at what distinguishes between those 3. Once I make that determination, then it kind of guides me on how I'm going to treat it. So let's start with respiratory distress. Respiratory distress. Inadequate breathing leads to hypoxemia and hypercarbia. We did that yesterday. Leads to cardiovascular failure and hypoperfusion. And I think Gus told me yesterday that without perfusion, there's no diffusion. And left untreated, things go from bad to worse. Now, what's that look like? Chief complaint, shortness of breath. Some people get worried. I don't. I'm a grown-up. We've always abbreviated that, shortness of breath, and some people have taken offense to that. And anybody that takes offense to that probably needs to get out of this business, because if that offends you, I don't know what this event you're going to see is going to do to you. Probably shut you down totally. You can make something out of anything, and I just don't think we should do it. So I have seen people say this, SOA, short of air. I just want to take those people out back and have a conversation. Okay? It's been forever SOB. We have a better name for it anyway, don't we? Come on, give me the difficult breathing term. Not agonal, but that would actually be what?
Dyspnea.
Dyspnea, yes, dyspnea, difficult breathing. So in my reports, just so I don't offend anybody and they don't have to know what the abbreviation means, patient complained of dyspnea. Oh yeah? Yeah, dyspnea. Well, tell me about that dyspnea. Restlessness, and somebody said, I think it was you, Jonah, how do you know your patients have trouble breathing? They have an altered mental status. You're suffocating, you're pissy, you're not feeling good, you're agitated. Increased or decreased pulse rate. There probably are going to be some pulse rate changes with it, but don't say it's always up or always down. As a rule, though, I would say if it's down, it's been going on a little longer. As a rule, I would say it's been going on a little bit longer. A low pulse rate will bother me more than a fast pulse rate. I'm just going to lean toward they're getting tired. May not be, but I'm just going to lean that direction. Changes in rate and depth. So, Christian, if you tell me someone's suffering from dyspnea, I'm going to go, oh yeah? How come? And you're going to say, they're breathing at 32 times a minute shallow. I'm going to help you out on the National Registry right now. The scenario reads, 64-year-old woman with a chief complaint of dyspnea is found sitting in the recliner of her home. Vital signs are as follows. Respiratory rate 32 and shallow. As soon as I read that, I know what I'm supposed to be doing for her. Assisting her respirations. I need to assist her. Why? Because the key word was there, shallow. Shallow. even if they said 16 in shallow, you may look at that and go, well, 16 is within the normal breathing range for an adult, but it's shallow, so I need to assist. And we'll talk about assisting that later and tomorrow. And then skin color changes. That was we spent some time with that yesterday. Cyanosis, pale. That's a pretty good clue that the pulse oximeter isn't needed. I don't need a pulse oximeter because they're blue. It's very apparent when you like, oh, they're blue. But pale works as well. What about pinker than normal? That's abnormal too, isn't it? And we talked about some of the ways you could do that with carbon monoxide poisoning and stuff like that. Do you have a question? You moved your hand. I'm like an auctioneer up here, like, sold! Sold. So what causes this respiratory distress? There are a number of them, but just going through the slides here, we already know about bronchoconstriction. I would add to that, put out here on the end, and or mucus. And or mucus. I think they're trying to say that in the slide, the narrowing of the bronchial tree due to inflammation, swelling, or bronchoconstriction. Can you narrow the airway just by filling it up with mucus? Yeah. Yeah. That's why we give the bronchodilator to reverse that. And somebody back here this morning already said beta 2 agonist. Good job with that. It can also be trauma related. I have to be aware of that, not to fast forward to trauma, but if somebody's got a broken rib or taken a baseball to the chest or got a punch to the chest or a stab wound to the chest, it's pretty obvious that you're going to have dyspnea secondary to trauma. We don't do much for broken ribs, but we make sure that they're breathing adequately and deep enough, because a person with a broken rib may begin to breathe shallow. Now, a broken rib from a 24-year-old college baseball player is different than a broken rib from a 72-year-old who slipped in the bathtub and broke their rib in there. One of them is much more prone to pneumonia and secondary injuries. Who would that be? The old lady in the bathtub? Yeah. You know, the baseball player is going to go get an x-ray and go, yep, got a broken rib. Limit your workouts for a little while. You'll be okay. The 72-year-old lady's going to get admitted to the hospital because of the pain that goes with that. People with broken ribs don't cough. They suppress their cough, especially an older person who already has a reason to suppress their cough because they just don't have the reflex to cough anymore. And so I heard someone coughing here just a minute ago, and when I cough, you cough. What we're doing is we're getting rid of something that's irritating our lung lining. You remove that irritant sits there and becomes infected, nasty, and can lead to pneumonia. May I say that smoking cigarettes paralyzes that reflex. So when the chemicals of inhalation of smoke hit your lining of your trachea, it paralyzes the little cilia. And cilia are just these little hair-like projections in your trachea that when an irritant touches them, it causes you to cough and get that out. Smoking, I believe, right in there with it.
Is that kind of why, like, smokers typically have to force out the mucus?
Mm-hmm. And that's why when they wake up coughing, they'll use this and say, I go outside and smoke, and I need to smoke to quit coughing. To re-paralyze that reflex. Yeah, and I believe vaping probably has the same effect to that. I'm going to err on the side of caution and say yes, it probably does. There are a lot of chemical irritants that paralyze that reflex. But having a broken rib will also paralyze that reflex, right? You will suppress it because it hurts too bad. So keep that in mind. Cardiac compromise. We kind of give you the little debate yesterday, or I did. Are they having shortness of breath because they're having a heart attack, or are they having a heart attack because they've been short of breath for 2 days? And so it's interrelated. We talked about that closed loop, did we not? The blood going through the lungs, If the blood doesn't go through the lungs appropriately, then that's going to back up. You're going to get edema in the lungs, going to cause shortness of breath. That called cardiac compromise will result in something called pink, frothy sputum. That sounds like an energy drink, doesn't it? Pink, frothy sputum. As you're on scene with these patients, please understand I'm dropping assessment hints in this lecture, okay? And this is part of that assessment called scene size up. We did the 30-foot approach. We touched the patient. We're sitting down to Margaret. She's in a recliner. She's shortness of breath today. Remember your patient stare? You haven't finished the call yet, all right? You're sitting there, you're talking to Margaret, and she got this. You can hear the crackles in her lungs, which indicate fluid. She coughs something up, and you're like, God. And you look over there to get her little waste basket by her recliner, and there's already piles of Kleenex and toilet paper. And now if it's old George just spits in a cup, and you'll see a solo cup or a coffee cup sitting on his end table that's full of this stuff. I've been to lung cancer patients before who are dying on the sofa, and if that's the sofa, I can get about this close before I start stepping in carpet that's saturated in blood and sputum that he's been sitting there spitting up for the last week. Someone asked me about shoes. What kind of shoes? Not Hey Dudes. Not lace-ups. You don't like lace-up boots? No, when he blows that into my boot, I do not want to go home with the corn kernel in my laces. I want to be able to hose it off, wipe it off, and disinfect it. And you sure don't want it between your toes. I'm not exaggerating when I say the carpet will be squishy with pink frothy sputum, because they're just too damn tired to get up and do anything any different. They just spit it out right there where it's at. I have literally moved someone from a bed who had diarrhea for so long in bed. I don't see it too much on mattresses anymore, but the older mattresses used to have a little steel insert on the side and a little vents, so when you laid on them, the air would go out. The diarrhea was running out of those vents. Now, nursing world doesn't see this. It's a different environment. Never compare nursing to pre-hospital medicine. We bring them something that's somewhat cleaned up and packaged and out of that environment. At least it's in a new environment, but you're working in that environment. Scene size up. I look in the trash can, if they have one sitting next to their bed or recliner or wherever they're housing up, to see what they've sped up. And if it's a pink frothy sputum, that gives me an indication that they've got congestive heart failure. That gives me an indication that that left ventricle is swollen and blood's backing up. And they cough that bloody stuff out of their lungs. And it's frothy because it's been mixed with air, right? It's in the alveoli, it's in the airways. You'll conduct the interview and they'll start, you'll hear it. It's like, did you vomit in your mouth or cough something up? They cough something up and they're like, we've got to spit. You'll be in the ambulance and they do that, and you need to be able to hand them something to spit in. And they obviously want to spit it out. And sometimes they're weak because they're short of air, short of breath. They don't give you that good old chewing tobacco spit. They just kind of, and it'll drip off their chin and you got to wipe it off. And you ready to go to work, Luke? Luke's like, brr, brr. I look in the trash can and it's not pink frothy sputum, but it's a greenish, yellowy, mucousy looking sputum. You have pneumonia. That's why you're short of breath. You have pneumonia. If I look in there and it looks like lung tissue, like clots, you may have lung cancer. I'm not going to say, do you have lung cancer, but you may have lung cancer. I don't tell them the diagnosis, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, that's lung tissue. And I've seen lung cancer patients get short of breath, obviously, and that stuff just start coming apart. Look in the trash can. That's a scene size up.
Which
That's the congestive heart failure. That's the cardiac compromise that you see written right here on the screen. Yes?
What if it's like a dark gray or blackish?
You see that a lot with environmental people who work in nasty environments. I've seen guys who just work in tire shops who are sitting there all day long fixing flats, get sick. Because they're breathing all those small rubber compounds as they mess it up. Farmers are real bad about it. Not so much in cab tractors, but a lot of them are open cab stations, and they're just breathing that crap in from the fields. Yes. It's just you're just coughing up foreign material. Sometimes that tissue is so dark, it's rotten. It's dead. It's necrotic. And I had a acquaintance who was a lung cancer patient. He's dead now. He died of a heart attack. Didn't die of lung cancer, died of a heart attack later. But he only had like 1/3 of his right lung left. And I said, "How'd you quit smoking?" He said, "Cough up a lung, you'll quit." And he literally coughed that out. It's just dead. It's necrotic. The cancer's taken over. It's horrible, horrible, horrible. Respiratory distress can also be caused by hyperventilation. I'll give you an example today with the anxiety and the fright. Anybody that gets scared can hyperventilate and cause respiratory distress. However, hyperventilation by definition means fast and deep, right? Can someone suffering from another condition hyperventilate? So hyperventilation can be the problem, or hyperventilation can be a symptom to another problem. Therefore, I'm not going to say slow your breathing down when you're hypoxic. I'm not going to say you need to calm down and breathe slower in through your nose, out. No, not if they're suffering from a cardiac condition. So that's why we don't put the paper bag over their face. Because you could be hyperventilating yet still be hypoxic. You with me? So know the root causes of that. Some other things that can cause respiratory distress. We talked about the trauma, stimulation of receptors in the lungs, inadequate gas exchange due to VQ mismatch. What I would take off of this slide is we can take substances into our body that could cause us to go into respiratory distress, aka opioids, aka fentanyl, aka morphine. Alcohol. Alcohol is a depressant. You can get so much alcohol you're not breathing very well. Never leave your drunk buddy on his back. Always roll him up over on his side with his knees tucked up nicely. We call that the recovery position. Patients who are breathing but are otherwise unconscious need to go into the recovery position unless there's some injury that's keeping you from it. That way, if they vomit, they won't aspirate on their vomit. So never leave your drunk buddy on his back. Always roll him up in the fetal position before you leave him on the sidewalk. No, I'm kidding there. But we know that there are certain substances that people recreationally use that can cause breathing difficulty. And things are so laced, illicit drugs are so laced with fentanyl now, we don't know when that's going to happen. So that can cause respiratory distress. Obviously, can cause respiratory distress. Takes a different turn when we talk about toxicology. I'm not in the field much anymore, nor I am in the climate where I would know this, but I'm unaware if huffing is still a thing. You probably are closer to that than I am. Is it still out there? Unfortunately, I guess. No, it is unfortunate, but I thought it might have died off because that is the dumbest thing a person can do is huff. Huff paint, that's permanent brain damage. You'll walk around like a weirdo for the rest of your life.
Now they have CO2 cartridges.
The huffing, yeah, or the whippets. And those things obviously disrupt the normal breathing pattern. I saw a kid one time take a bottle of refrigerant that you would put in an air conditioning system and put his lips on it and crack the bottle and got him a hit of refrigerant. There was this frostbite, steamy stuff coming off of his lips because he froze his lips. And he passed out immediately from asphyxiation. Probably didn't do any damage, but probably didn't help him either. But if he stuck his head in a brown paper bag full of silver flake spray paint, he's going to get a little high off of it, obviously, but he could also walk around with a wheelbarrow the rest of his life thinking he's a truck driver. And there's a guy in Bennington, Oklahoma, who does just that. Pushes a wheelbarrow around town with antennas on it, with chrome exhaust pipes coming off of it, and he thinks he's driving a truck, and that's all he does. And what causes that? Krylon. Rust-Oleum. So, categorizing these things is pretty easy, and the registry wants you to do so, and they want you to do so because if you categorize it correctly, you treat it correctly. So, respiratory distress is the patient is complaining of shortness of breath or dyspnea, yet the rate's good, the tidal volume's good. They're compensating. I'm having trouble breathing, but I'm compensating for it. It's kind of like stage 1. We don't know how long these patients will stay in these stages, so we must act quickly. If they have an SpO2 reading, that abbreviation is referring to the pulse oximeter reading. Can I clean up some stuff before you ever fall into this habit? You may have heard this. I'd be surprised if you haven't. Somebody, some healthcare person especially, but somebody out there going, I just heard it from a family member the other day, his O2 stats are falling. No, it's not stats. It's not a statistic. It's a SAT. It's a saturation. You say your O2 SAT is falling, but not stat. Please, don't fall into that trap. And we already know the limitations of the pulse oximeter anyway. If you're going to run the pulse oximeter and you give me a number off of it, what you're really telling me is SpO2 is 94. SpO2 is whatever number is displayed. That's how you document it in your report, okay? Please do not write in your report O2 stat 98. Please don't do that. If I'm a character witness or an expert witness, I see that, I'm already discrediting you right now. You may be great and did nothing wrong, but I'm like, God, no, it's SAT. I don't even want you to document it like that. I want you to document patient's breathing rate was 64 and shallow. SpO2 reading was 88. Okay? You with me on that? You will hear healthcare workers say stat. That's not what this is. It's a SAT, not a stat. Consider CPAP. Do you know what that stands for? If you don't, you will now, and you should from here on out. Continuous positive airway pressure. Continuous positive airway pressure. We'll play with this in the lab tomorrow, but what this really is, it's a mask that fits on the patient's face. Let me give you a little pointer here. They must be breathing on their own, and they must be alert. And what this device is going to do is when it goes on their face and they inhale, it'll be real easy to inhale because they're going to have some pressure on the air. The air is pressurized in the mask. The air can be air or the air can have oxygen mixed with it. Now in the pre-hospital environment, you're going to have oxygen mixed with it because that's going to be your power source, the compressed air in the cylinder, okay? That makes sense to everyone? People at home wear CPAP to help them sleep. It may or may not have oxygen with it, but it's got a power source that's generating the pressure. Yeah, sure. Sure.
Have you ever ran into the issue where instead of putting distilled water in it, they put pure water?
Get all the pathogens. Yep. Yep. Pond water. Yeah. And they get all the calcium, they get all the minerals and stuff too, which the minerals are probably better than the little swimming bacteria that are in there. Piece of trivia, Billy, that connector you talked about has a size, and everybody needs to know this. That size is 15 by 22. That's 15/22. All airway devices will interchange with all other airway devices, no matter the manufacturer. That's an industry standard, and the size is 15 by 22, and that refers to 15 millimeters ID, 22 millimeters OD. It's just the size of the connector. So Billy, if you're running one brand and I come in and hook onto yours, it'll hook up because that's an industry standard, okay? It's kind of trivial, but it's hard to be professional if you don't know the trivia to begin with. So kind of keep that in mind. 15 by 22 adapter. So the CPAP device in the pre-hospital setting, the one on you have in your ambulance, is going to be powered by compressed oxygen from a cylinder. And you can dial up the pressure. You can adjust the pressure. Your protocol will tell you what pressure to start at. You put this on the patient. Remember, they're alert and they're breathing on their own. When that patient takes a breath in, that pressure is going to help push the air into the airways. That feels pretty good to them. But the C stands for continuous. So that pressure is always there. So when they exhale, they have to exhale out against that pressure, right? If it's continuous, it helped me breathe in, but I'm going to have to work a little harder to breathe out. There's some benefit and disadvantage to that. The benefit of that is, do I keep the alveoli inflated? That's called PEEP, isn't it? And remember, PEEP from the other day stood for positive end expiratory pressure. That's what the person breathing through pursed lips was doing. They were increasing the pressure of exhalation. Well, this mask on their face is going to do that too. The disadvantage of that is it's harder to exhale. And we already said exhale should be just passive. Now you've got to work. Now you got to work some more. Therefore, Jonah, some services carry BiPAP. And Riley's up here going, if he gives me one more abbreviation, I'm going to scream. You're not going to do that, are you, Riley? No. So we have CPAP, as listed up there. We also have BiPAP. The BI stands for biphasic. Biphasic. And here in this course in paramedic school, when you hear the word phasic, you're talking about some phase. So biphasic means the pressure may be at 24, arbitrary number, on inhalation and 14 on exhalation. Therefore, it's easier to breathe out. So the machine knows when it's going to breathe out and will lower the pressure. It will split the breathing into two phases, inhalation, exhalation. CPAP, fixed number. BiPAP says, I'll give you more when you inhale, I'll give you less when you exhale, so it's not as hard. Patients tend to tolerate the BiPAP better than the CPAP. Which one's more expensive? Which one are you probably going to have on your ambulance? CPAP. In hospital, if they put them on a ventilator, they can adjust all these settings. And we'll talk about a ventilator back later in the course when we do paramedic assist skills. We'll get our ventilator in here and show you how that works. And it's not as hard as you make it seem, one would seem. Any questions on CPAP? What do they have to be to use it? Breathing and alert. Able to follow commands. Able to understand what you're doing for them. There's some other disadvantages to it as well. What if they're nauseated? And they throw open that mask. You can't get the airway cleared out. Yeah, so I'd be really, if they're nauseated as well, I'd be kind of cautious about using it because I don't want them to puke in the mask and me not be able to clear it out quick enough and aspirate. Respiratory failure. Okay, we've moved into the more serious category here. Now things are starting to fall apart. It's kind of like shock. We had compensated shock and decompensated. In the respiratory side of things, we're compensating, now we're decompensating, and we'll call that failure. It's easy. The respiratory system's failing to do its job. Okay? The respiratory system is failing to do its job. So our numbers are going to look goofy. Our pulse oximetry is going to be bad. Our volume is going to be bad. Our rate may be bad. All the above may be bad. Our patients look like that 30-foot assessment, you go, they're sick. And how did we define sick? Without intervention, they'll die. This is a point where we must intervene. Tomorrow in lab, you will learn how to use a bag valve mask to assist someone's breathing. May I tell you this? You may assist them with a breathing rate of 0, meaning they're not breathing at all. They only may be breathing 6 times a minute in shallow. You're still going to assist with that. Sometimes we have to get in time with their breathing rate and maybe squeeze the bag in between every breath they take. We call that interposing ventilations. So if they're breathing 8 times a minute, and every time they're not breathing, I breathe for them, I can get it up to 16 pretty easy, if that makes sense to you. The registry will love to give you a scenario to see if you're going to pull that bag valve mask out and use it on the patient. We also call that assisting ventilations. So you may not see the words bag valve mask, you may just see the words assist the patient's breathing. And for the EMT, that assistance is with the bag valve mask. For the paramedic, that assistance is with the bag valve mask, but they can escalate it up to some deeper airway assistance, all the way up to putting the patient on a ventilator and doing it hands-free. The paramedic gets in trouble because they'll go all the way to that step and skip the basic step. Never forget your basics. So what you're learning in here will solve 98+% of all patients out there. Yeah, paramedic school is longer, it's harder, it's more detailed, it's critical, but that's only applying to 2% of the patients. Everything else can be handled with what you're doing in this class. So that's why I take it serious. That's why I let you really know what's going on with your patients, okay? So don't get mad at me for that. These are patients that need supplemental oxygen. And if you will, let me go to this board and wipe it off and kind of give you some ideas on how we do that. How do you give someone oxygen? How do you give them oxygen? Well, let's start simple. What's the concentration of oxygen in the atmosphere? 21%. Therefore, if I change that to a decimal, it's 0.21, isn't it? So Chas, think of this. I'm breathing 21%. I'm breathing air that contains 21% oxygen. I am inspiring a total of 100. Of that 100, 21% of it's oxygen. Does that kind of make sense to everyone? Of the total amount of air that I'm inspiring, 21% of that is oxygen. Or I could write it this way, and this is how medicine writes it. It is FiO2. Fi stands for fractionally inspired. And then what that means is, what fraction of what you're inspiring is oxygen? And if you're on room, what we call room air, the air in the room, it's 0.21.
Inspired.
Inspired. And that's a fancy word for inhaled. Oklahoma State. What? I graduated from Oklahoma State. I'm not making fun of it. I like it.
Most people make fun of me for it.
I would not do that. Not that I'm a big college sports person, but I graduated there twice. I used to work for them. That was...
You like OU better?
No. Snobby. They're too snobby. Fractionally inspired O2 on room air is equal to 0.21. Okay? We're all breathing FiO2 of 0.21. If I add oxygen to it, if I add supplemental oxygen, like coming from a cylinder, we'll show those cylinders tomorrow, I can therefore increase my FiO2, can I not? I can increase my FiO2. And so we have devices that will deliver that oxygen. Let's start with a very, very simple one. Let's just say blow-by oxygen. And I'll probably use blow-by oxygen on pediatrics. That's the category that really gets the blow-by oxygen. I just kind of lay the mask. We even got little stuffed animals that you can hook the oxygen tubing, and it'll blow the oxygen out of the belly of the stuffed animal. And the kid can hold the stuffed animal and be comforted by it, but they're getting oxygen, aren't they? Their little environment around their face has more oxygen than yours. Do I know what the FiO2 is, though? I don't have control over it, do I? It's too loose. It's too dependent on too many things. I know they're getting more than I am, but I don't know how much they're getting. Now, we don't want to give high concentrations of oxygen to newborns. Could damage the eyes. The eyes don't like an oxygen-rich environment to a newborn. But I will never withhold it from a baby who's so blue he's turning purple. If they need it, they need it. But just be cautious with that.
So can you give it to them, maybe, like as long as it's not in their eyes?
It's safer to give it blow-by than it is to put a big old high concentration mask on them. But a newborn probably isn't turning blue because of lack of oxygen. It's because of lack of breathing. You with me? Another way I can administer oxygen is with a nasal cannula. And we will get those out and play with those tomorrow. This tubing hooks to the oxygen cylinder, and it fits in the patient's nose, and it blows a set amount of oxygen up their nose, and we hope they're inhaling that in. When we give oxygen, we're giving it by some unit called liters per minute. Liters per minute. So when we let the oxygen out of the tank, we have a regulator that we can dial up. It's actually a flow meter, and we can dial up how many liters per minute we're letting out. And on a nasal cannula, we go from 1 to 6 liters per minute. We really don't want to go past 6. Past 6, it's like, it's a lot of air blowing in their nose. It's highly discomfort, and 6 is the max, okay? So what's the max flow of a nasal cannula? 6. The rule is for every liter per minute given on a nasal cannula, I increase it about 3%. Some people will say 4%. How about I just go in between, say 3 to 4%. So if I give a patient 1 liter per minute on a nasal cannula, I add 3 to 21. Therefore, my FiO2 is what? 0.24. That make sense to you? If I add 6 liters per minute nasal cannula, what's my FiO2? 6, 3, 18, right? 18 plus 21, about 39%. So somewhere around 40% or FiO2 of 0.4 is the max I can give on a nasal cannula. That would be if they're breathing through their nose too. What if they were just mouth breathing and I stuck it up there? What if they were fully congested and couldn't even move air through their nose? Then it probably wouldn't be a good delivery device, would it? The next delivery device is a face mask, and we have a whole bunch of those. We have a simple face mask, and it's just a mask that blows oxygen. You probably will not see those in the field. We have non-rebreathers. It almost looks the same as the simple mask. We actually have a partial non-rebreather, abbreviated RNB. And we also have a Venturi. Let me talk about those all individually. So,
On the non-rebreathers, they always told us that we had to have the O2 above 10.
that is a damn lie. But I am so thankful for you to bring that up because I need to get that stated. Let's go through it and I'll show you why it's a lie. And tomorrow you will put your hands on this so you'll see it. I know visualization hands-on is good for learning too. So you'll see it tomorrow. A simple face mask is just a mask. It has nothing else on it. There's no reservoir bag or anything, just a mask. It's got tubing. And you start at 6 there, and we don't use them. We just don't use them in pre-hospital world. The non-rebreather is probably most likely 99% sure that's what you have on your ambulance. So the non-rebreather mask, Jonah, that mask has a reservoir bag attached to it. I'm sure you've all seen those. It's a mask and it's got this bag on it. That bag is hooked to the oxygen cylinder. That bag is inflated with 100% oxygen from that cylinder. That mask fits on you and it's got little ports, and when you exhale, your air goes out those ports, and when you inhale, there's some little rubber flaps that close. Therefore, when you're inhaling, where are you getting your air from? That bag. And what is that air? 100% oxygen. So a non-rebreather mask, in theory, gives you an FiO2 close to 1, close to 1, close to 100%. Why isn't it a true 100%? There's always going to be a little bit of residual CO2 left in here, okay? You're always, that dead space in the mask now must be accounted for. You with me? So to Jonah's point, what's the flow rate on a non-rebreather? I just don't want the bag to collapse when they inhale. In other words, that bag should not crinkle up during inhalation. It should flatten a little bit, but if it's just staying tight all the time, you're just wasting oxygen. It's just blowing by, not doing anything. The flow rate on a non-rebreather should be that the bag does not deflate more than 2/3 on inhalation. As long as there's still air in the bag, your flow rate's enough. Any higher than that. But Jonah, we got some silly ass rules out there because people don't have any common sense and realize, hey, as long as that bag's not deflated, you're still getting 100% oxygen. If you crinkle that bag up, it ain't high enough. Now I've had some big old boys on these bags that are hurting and they're breathing really deeply, and I give them that. And even up at 12 and 15 liters per minute, those boys are sucking it down. You're like, damn. And I'm turning it up all the way up to like flush. They're getting like 20, 25 liters a minute because they are really sucking it down, right? I've had some little old ladies that if I run it on 10, 12, 15, it's just staying tight. It's got to match their tidal volume. So not all people hit 10 is what I'm getting at, right? Everybody's different. So let's customize it. In a hospital setting where I got a 15,000 gallon tank of liquid oxygen out back, which is a damn lot of liters once it turns to a gas from a liquid, versus I got a cylinder this long in my ambulance, I don't need to waste it. I still see protocols, Jonah, that says if you're going to use a non-rebreather, 15 liters a minute. There are EMS protocols that says if you use a non-rebreather, it's 15 liters a minute. You might find it written in the textbook. I just don't understand why we can't get through some of this stuff and say, no, I'm going to dial the liter flow up on a non-rebreather to match the patient's tidal volume. Some people are small, some people are big. Does that make sense? It kind of limits you too. You know, let's just say, let's give it a 10. Let's just arbitrary number 10. What if they're flattening the bag? I mean, did they ever go back and say to these people, hey, if 10's not enough, you know you can turn it up. I had a nursing faculty, which I won't mention any names or tell you where that nurse works. I had a nursing faculty tell me on the bottom of that regulator, and we call these a ball float regulator. We'll see these tomorrow. There'll be a little ball in here, and it's graduating 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 up. And you turn this dial up, and as that ball rises, if it's next to 4, then you're getting 4 liters a minute out the tubing. You'll see it more tomorrow. At the bottom of this is a tapered cone, and it's green. Anything with oxygen involved is going to have a green color, hint, hint, ding, ding. We have a nickname for that thing called the Christmas tree. It looks like an upside down Christmas tree. Well, I had a nurse tell students that if you're going to hook this to a bag valve mask, that you need to take that Christmas tree off. If you take the Christmas tree off, you're left with a threaded connector. And it's threaded for a reason. A oxygen-powered delivery device that you got a hose to. It will be just like a hydraulic hose or a water hose. You have to thread it on there. But if I'm smashing tubing that's just tubing, and I need to go up on that taper to lock. And I sat there and watched the nursing student take the Christmas tree off and struggle trying to get the tubing over the threads. I'm like, what in the hell are you teaching them? Well, the liter flow's got to be so high with a bag valve mask. Stop. The tree's there for a reason. The thread's there for a reason. And you're instructing students wrongly, and you're not allowing me to correct it. And when I tried to correct it, I got shut down immediately. It says, you're here to assist, not teach. I don't know what you're here for. But we got students leaving that with inaccurate information. Jonah, I know you see it and you bring it up, and please understand that when I jump back, it's not at you, it's just at the stuff that's out there, and it's got to be stopped because it's not right. Okay, calm down, Brandon. Calm down. You know when I'll quit teaching? When I start getting mad about it. As long as I'm getting mad, that's my indicator that keep going. Just keep going. Somebody's got to put a stop to this. So what's the flow rate on a non-rebreather? I don't want the bag to collapse. So as a general rule, no more than 2/3 collapse. If I still got 1/3 of the bag left at the end of that cycle, I've still got oxygen in there, right? If I set it at 15, it's going to blow up tight. It'll never deflate. And the rest of it's just wasted out in the atmosphere. And I've got a cylinder this long, it's not going to make it to the hospital. And then you're going to get mad because you're changing out oxygen bottles all the time. Why are you changing it out all the time? Well, you're running more than you need to run it. I'll also say this. It's a rarity anymore that I need to give that much oxygen. We talked about that the other day, right? Yesterday. It's kind of rare I have to give that much. A respiratory distress patient needs some form of supplemental oxygen. Whether it's non-rebreather, whether it's a simple face mask, whether it's a nasal cannula, my goal is I just got to get it up above 94 and call it good. Yes, John?
So would you give them, say somebody set it at like 60 and put like non-rebreather, would you give them excess amounts of oxygen until they reach the SATs of above 94 or close to, and then taper them down to lower percentages of oxygen?
So when you're on a if you're on a non-rebreather, you're given an FiO2 close to 1. Once you, and let's just say you went from 87 up here to 94, I would probably start the other direction, but to stay to your point, and you got them up to 94, the only way to turn that down is to take it off. A non-rebreather is going to give how much if it's done correctly? Close to 1. If I don't need 1, that comes off and I go to a nasal cannula.
Okay, so then what about like if you did a mask, right? You put a mask on there, it's 50%. You're using non-rebreather first, but let's just say all you had was a mask. You put a mask on, you're putting them on 6 liters, they get to 94, would you then taper them down to 2 liters? Try to compensate for not giving them too much oxygen?
Here's how I would approach it. So I hope this makes sense. If I've got somebody in distress or failure, I'm probably going to start 1 to 6 cannula. They can still talk to me. I don't run the risk of them vomiting in the mask, and it's much, much better tolerated. Let me ask you this question, kind of to that point. Chas, let's just say you're struggling to breathe. You're in arrest or distress. I mean, you're not in arrest. You're in failure or distress, okay? Have you ever had a near drowning experience? We all have. Some closer than others. We've all probably been underwater too long, probably been assing around in a swimming pool and somebody held you down. You know, the fear of drowning is real, right? Suffocating, can't catch your breath, whatever the case may be that got you there. The last thing you're going to want something over your face. Y'all with me on that? If you're struggling to breathe, the last thing you want is something over your face. People tend to tolerate the nasal cannula much, much better. And I've got a range here, right, of that 24 all the way up to 40 just with the cannula. Please don't get this confused with high-flow nasal cannulas that became popular during COVID, and they had flow rates up to 40 liters a minute. Your ambulance cannot withstand 40 liters a minute flow. You just don't have that much. So throw that to the side. You'll hear it out there, but just throw it to the side. This nasal cannula gives me some control. In the ambulance, my options are nasal cannula, non-rebreather. When I go non-rebreather, I'm just at 100. I really can't do anything. So, Jonah, what I would do is take a patient and try the cannula first, raise that up until I get what I need. If that doesn't work, then switch over to a mask. But I think it would be rare anymore that I would start with a mask.
Well, my question was, like, you say don't give them so much oxygen because you kind of...
We avoid hyperoxia.
Right. So once you got them to 94%, to avoid hyperoxia...
We need to tailor it down or hold it there. And you can't tailor it down with a non-rebreather because it's just 100. If you try to tailor down a non-rebreather, you're probably going to go way the other direction. Because if the bag flattens, and now they're just rebreathing their air. Now they got a paper bag over their face, in essence. That make sense? So here's one other mask. You will not see it in the ambulance unless you're doing a intra-facility transport from one area to the other. And that mask is called a Venturi mask. And I don't even know if I've got one here to show you tomorrow. I may have to dial that up on Google or something. But basically a Venturi mask, if you know what a Venturi is, carburetors in motorcycles, lawnmowers, older automobiles run by this principle. A Venturi mask is going to shove oxygen in through here. And the Venturi principle says this rate or this speed at which this oxygen flows through here will draw in air through these little ports that are on the side of it. And I can precisely adjust the FiO2 by adjusting the size of those ports. If you're ever accelerating your weed eater, this is what you're doing. If you take your lawnmower and go from idle to full throttle, you're adjusting the size of that Venturi. In that case, you're not pulling in atmospheric air, you're pulling in fuel vapors. And that's atmosphere. But in the oxygen mask, this is oxygen rushing through here, sucking air in from the side. And due to the size of that port, we can precisely adjust our flow rates. So now we go, Jonah, I want my patient on 28% oxygen or FiO2 of 0.28. I'll take that mask and I just dial it up to 0.28. Put it on there, set it for a liter flow that the mask manufacturer says to set it at, and I'm giving them exactly 0.28. Cool? You see that in hospital, long-term care, stuff like that. We really don't mess with that in the ambulance. And it'd be rare that we would use it, and they're rather expensive, and you're just not going to have them. I've seen them in the ambulance before. I don't know why we had them. This is a device that is almost kind of like a prescription. Some physician or pulmonologist said, I want my patient to have 0.32 for the next 6 hours. Well, the Venturi mask can allow you to dial that up precisely. So you'll hear about it, but you won't use it. Make sense? One more way to give oxygen, and then we'll take our break. The last way to give oxygen is with a bag valve mask. And we abbreviate that BVM in our business because, Riley, we abbreviate everything, don't we? Bag valve and a mask. Mask, a one-way valve, and a bag. You also will hear them called in the old days AMBU bags, AMBU. And AMBU is just a manufacturer of the bag. There are many out there now, but I think that caught on back in the 60s, the AMBU bag. You squeeze the bag, air goes through the valve, comes through the mask, goes into the lungs. We hope. That mask and that valve hooked together with what size of connection? 15 by 22. Therefore, if the paramedic intubates the patient, I take the mask off now, just hook it to the tube that's in the trachea. That connection is 15 by 22. It's going to work. We'll see this tomorrow. We'll put our hands on them. I squeeze that bag. I am administering some volume of air, am I not? Now those bags vary in sizes, and we'll just say a common size bag holds 1,000 milliliters of air. How do I know how much air? How do I know how hard to squeeze? I will tell you this, current research has shown we're squeezing it too hard, too fast. We need to give enough air to make the chest rise and no more. We just want the chest to come up and no more. These big old burly firemen, they get in there and put it between their legs and go, and they shove 1,000, 1,500 milliliters of air, and it goes up, and they keep going with the squeezing. Where's the extra air go? In the stomach. And eventually you blow the stomach up with enough air, you got to burp, don't you? And when our patients burp, they bring everything else out with it. So you'll get to see what they've had for dinner in the last 6 hours. And it comes rolling out with it. It's aggravating as hell. Plus, if it's too much pressure in the chest, blood can't get to the heart and it will lower the blood pressure. Perfusion will die because of a bag valve mask. Most people use a bag valve mask wrong. And looking back on how I used to use it, I used it wrong. Because we were taught you can't have small hands. And if you've got small hands, get 2 hands on it. That was a lie, okay? It's such a lie, and it's such a big problem that some EMS agencies are using pediatric bags on adults. So you can't squeeze it too much. I'm telling you, squeezing it too much is a problem. I hope we correct that tomorrow, and I hope I don't have to correct some adjunct faculty member, but I might. Old habits die hard, right? But most of the guys we have are pretty up to date on their stuff. So a bag valve mask, if it's not hooked to supplemental oxygen, how much oxygen is it delivering? 21%. If I hook it to supplemental oxygen and inflate that reservoir bag, how much am I giving? Close to 1. How much oxygen should flow into the BVM? What liters per minute? If I hook it to oxygen, what liters per minute should I set it at? Joan, I'll let you tackle that.
They always told us just before, above 15.
As long as that bag does not totally deflate when I squeeze the bag. I will tell you 15 is way too high. You got a 25,000 gallon tank of oxygen out back. They're telling you that so at least you'll have enough. You just don't have that luxury in the ambulance. There's just no reason to go that high. As long as the bag doesn't collapse when you let off and the bag refills. And all this will make much better sense tomorrow when you're actually seeing the bag inflate and stuff. Now, on top of that valve of the bag valve mask, there is also a port. What size is it? Why would the top of that valve have a port? But why would it have a port 15 by 22? You're right, that's the exhale port, but what else could I do with that?
You can put the color change device on there.
You could put a color change device on it, but that would actually be between the valve and the tube. You could put a nebulizer on it. Remember we talked about nebulizing medication yesterday? You can hook that. So a nebulizer, what's the connection on a nebulizer? What size? So can I plug that on a bag valve mask and take that asthma patient and help push that medicine down to the target organ? Yes. How many people do it? Not enough. Remember I talked about yesterday that if you put the nebulizer on and they're only moving air to here, how do I know they're only moving air to here? Because I listened and it got silent. The more silent, the deeper I went in their chest. They're only moving air to right here. If I listen here, I don't hear anything. They're that constricted. Where's the muscle that I need to relax? Down here. But they're only inhaling it to here. Are they doing any good with the albuterol? I can hook it to the bag valve mask and assist them in their tidal volume. Therefore, I would be pushing the medication down to where it needed to go and get it to relax. No, not many people are doing that. But you can. Why? Because all airway devices are 15 by 22. They'll interchange. Cool, Luke? So how much oxygen can I give with a bag valve mask? Either 21 or 1. 21 or 1. So the bag valve mask can both be a ventilatory assistant device and an oxygen delivery device. What are these all up here? Just what? They're just oxygen delivery devices. This one is a ventilatory and an oxygen delivery device. So if they're shallow or their rate's bad, which one am I going to use? If they're shallow or the rate is bad? The BVM. If they just need supplemental oxygen, in your world it's either going to be the nasal cannula or the non-rebreather. And if I'm using the non-rebreather correctly, the only thing I can give is close to 100%. I can't dial it off. With me? Well, we get into this and we're passionate about it and we study it hard and you take a lot of notes and I write a lot of things because what's your number one call? Okay. So when we get back, we're going to talk about respiratory arrest. So let's take our... So be back here at 10 till.